Is Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme? In today's episode, we're going to cover that and a lot more. So let's dive in. What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Quantum Resistant Ledger channel, your video portal into the world of post-quantum digital asset security. On today's episode, we're diving into, is Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme? With me is our Director of Outreach at the QRL Strike. It's awesome to have you with me. How's your day going?
Good. Always glad to be back.
Cool. Well, for those of you watching this, obviously with the title, is Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme? Some of you may be yelling at the computer and saying, no, it's not. And maybe a few of you skeptics or fudders out there are saying, well, is it a Ponzi scheme? So we're going to dive into just that in today's video. So Strike, before we dive into me asking you the question and kind of picking this apart a little bit, I just want to give 1 minute of background on who Charles Ponzi is, what a Ponzi scheme is, and then that will set up a little bit of a definition before we dive into it. So for those of you at home, a Ponzi scheme derives from a man named Charles Ponzi. He was born in 1882 in Italy. And Ponzi schemes, the fraud had been done before, but never on his level. So that's why the term was coined after his last name. So what he did in the 1920s in the US is he had a fraud, a scheme where he would lure investors in promising either, 50% profits within 45 days or 100% profits in 90 days. And the way he paid the early investors was with luring in new investors, and the scheme kept going on. And he used what was called international reply coupons. So this was back in the day. We don't really do this now, but you would, let's say you had family back overseas in Europe, you'd send them a package. The international reply coupon would let them reply to you. So the scheme was that, we're going to have arbitrage and that's how you're going to make money. But the scheme went on for almost a year. I think he ended up stealing $20 million from investors. In today's money, that equates to about $250 million. But that's the premise of what a Ponzi scheme is. And that's who Charles Ponzi is. So that is kind of the definition of a Ponzi scheme. You're luring in new investors, saying that there's an actual product or something of value, and you're actually just paying the early people in if new people come in. So it's a scheme. So I just wanted to go over a brief history lesson there. And with that, Strike, I want to ask you, is Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme, or does it have any elements of that? I'd love to dive into that.
Sure. So it's not going to matter what I say. Everyone's going to always form their own opinion.
Yeah.
But what I can do is I'll present my opinion, and then everyone else can decide. But you did a really good intro as far as what a Ponzi is. There's a couple things that I would add, but I want to take one step back. And as you were talking, I realized that we weren't talking, is Bitcoin a bubble? That question didn't come up, and I remember that was quite a thing for quite a while now, but nobody's really asked. I haven't heard that. I've heard the narrative get toned down quite a bit. So in the case of a bubble, I think that's because of the $0 to $20,000 back down to $3, and now into the 40s. And as many of us already know, at the from the tulip bulb mania, one of the most famous bubbles. I mean, if you look up bubble, you'll see a picture of a tulip from the 1600s. Tulips were in such a bubble that they were selling for 10 times the annual income of a skilled artisan, and so 10 years of someone that was skilled was the price. It was insanity. But as we know, tulips never recovered, right? At that point, I mean, there was never any such thing as having to work for average wage of 10 years to buy a tulip. So I think that's interesting, and the reason I'm bringing it back to that is because as we move forward with crypto, I expect that each one of these narratives will be shot and dead. All right. So with that being said, Ponzi schemes, you covered a lot of it, but Ponzi schemes are based on, really at the end of the day, they're based on deception, lies, misdirection. These are all things that perpetuate the Ponzi scheme until it eventually runs out. Bitcoin's transparent. You can see the code. There is no deception. You can look at it. You can run your own node. You can have it be what you know, you can, everything is there for you to see. So if that's not transparency, you know, the opposite of deception, then I guess I just don't know what it is. So the other thing is too, the money with the Ponzi scheme, you've got, you know, you have money that's paying earlier investors using investments from future investors, and that money is the same money, right? So, but with Bitcoin, the money is not, it's not the same dollars or euros or whatever it is. It's not moving. It's not moving in the same way. The money, you know, they're not the same dollars. So I've talked to other people about this online, and then they'll say, well, you know, it was a bubble, but it's not anymore, or it's a Ponzi scheme, but okay, fine. And then you'll convince them, okay, it's not a Ponzi scheme, but the effect is still the same. Well, what do you mean the effect, the end result, or the effect is still the same? And they say, well, you know, people lose money. Well, if some people lose money, you're basically describing any publicly traded asset class.
Yeah.
So is Bitcoin a Ponzi? No. Were there a lot of people saying that it was a bubble at the time? Yeah. Is anyone talking tulips anymore? Not really. So Ponzi will get shut down eventually too, in my opinion.
Yeah, and as with each year going on, obviously the case against that becomes stronger and stronger. And I think a few parts to mention here that just to kind of reiterate on them are, you know, no investment returns are promised with Bitcoin. You know, Satoshi wasn't sitting there writing the white paper saying, hey, if you invest in year 2 or after this halving, you're going to make more money. Those were just built-in incentives in game theory that actually, in hindsight, just keep seeming smarter and smarter. But it's important to know, you know, there's no pre-mine. No one is the CEO. There's no Charles Ponzi heading up Bitcoin. Bitcoin is fully distributed. As you mentioned before, it's open source. And even if you look at it, you know, eventually, you know, if you're profiting from it, it's, you know, taxed as property. So like we go on and on, the list can go on and on. Obviously, Bitcoin is not a Ponzi scheme, but I think it's important to hit some of those points home because some people do just look at charts, or if they're just hearing about it and they think, oh, you know, it's just, you know, it's only the value of what people think. But it's like, okay, well, what are you saying that like when it comes to, you know, the stock market and other areas, people lose in that too. But you just claiming that Bitcoin is simply a Ponzi scheme or a bubble, it just doesn't do it justice. And there's no strong, valid argument you know, proving that. And, you know, I really haven't seen any valid parts, you know, whether it be 4 or 5 years ago, or especially today, that even dispute that.
Yeah. And the only thing I'd add to that is a Ponzi, you know, the Ponzi scheme has its, it has the person usually has a person facilitating. I think it's probably possible to do with blockchain technology. If someone were to do it, it's possible it might have even been done. But to the point of Bitcoin, Satoshi, I think one of his quotes word for word was essentially, it might make sense if other people start to think the same way, it might make sense to get some. It's like he's throwing, you know, it's his project. He's throwing his own variability into it, saying that, hey, think for yourself. It might make sense. Not, I can guarantee you 50% returns in 3 months or 100% in 9 months or whatever, 30 days or whatever it was. So completely different narratives, completely different topics, completely different levels of transparency. I think we've buried this.
Yeah. And, you know, and another part is just, you know, he, she, or them, whoever it is, they haven't even collected their own earnings based on how much bigger it's got over time. So there's still, you know, 1 million of those coins out there. So I think that, you know, kind of ties up that question. What I want to ask as a follow-up to that question is, if Bitcoin is not a Ponzi scheme, it's not a pyramid scheme, and it is a sound store of value currently in present day in 2021, then what other risks does Bitcoin potentially face in the near future or the far future if it doesn't face any at the moment?
Well, the only thing I'd add to that is the pyramid scheme that you just brought up.
Yeah.
Pyramid schemes, you know, they have some similar things with
Ponzi's.
with Ponzi schemes,
Yeah.
and we all know most. I'm sure all of us know what multi-level marketing is. But with MLM and pyramid and things like that, you have a clearly defined hierarchy, right? You have someone at the top of the pyramid, and then you have their subs, right? And the commissions generally flow up, right? Bitcoin doesn't pick favorites. Bitcoin doesn't pick winners and losers. Bitcoin doesn't care where you went to school, doesn't care your religion, doesn't care how much money you have, doesn't care if you're married, divorced, your orientation. It doesn't care about anything.
Yep.
Everyone's got the same set of rules.
Completely agnostic.
Yep. Pyramids don't have the same set of rules. Pyramids have, is built under hierarchy. So I just wanted to cover that before we moved on. So go ahead. What was the final part of that question?
Yeah, so we covered Ponzi schemes. I mentioned pyramid schemes in that. You briefly touched on that. So my question is that if it's not a Ponzi scheme, if it's not a pyramid scheme, and for the time being, it's a really great store of value moving forward, then what are some of the potential risks or the risk that Bitcoin faces in the future?
Yeah, so as you know, as many of our viewers already know, here on the Quantum Resistant Ledger project, we're preparing for what we call is Y2K, which is similar to Y2K. We call it Y2Q for quantum, obviously, and essentially what this risk becomes is there is as quantum computers are being brought to scale, it has been shown that a sufficiently powerful quantum computer has the ability to reverse a public key into a private key. And I was on Twitter the other day, and there was some confusion over, well, we'll just change the hashing algorithm and other things like that. Now, I'm not faulting anyone that, certainly don't fault anyone that gets a little wound in different ways over asymmetric encryption, symmetric encryption, public-private keys, hashing algorithms, and things like that. These are all, these are all technical concepts that really just don't come up in normal conversation. Well, I guess it depends on your crowd, but you hang with. But most of these, these are pretty obscure terms. But I just wanted to point out Bitcoin's vulnerability is not about the hashing. So pay to public key hash. If I'm paying to a Bitcoin address, which is a hashed version of that public key, that's pretty secure. So being able to find a pre-image with Grover's, which is what a quantum computer would use to attack hashing, that's considered right now to be quantum secure. With that being said, there is this risk, and there is this risk between the private key and the public key. Now, the private key is as most of us know, is just your Bitcoin private key. It's a 256-bit random number. That's all that it is. It's a 256-bit random number, and then it goes through a process called elliptical curve multiplication, and you get a public key. Now, the public key, you can send funds to a public key, but a lot of people a lot of people hash the public key, and then you can pay to a public key hash instead. That would be the address that you would give to someone to pay, because hashes are more secure, and I think a lot of wallets support those now. But the ability for Shor's algorithm in a sufficiently powerful quantum computer, even if most of the addresses on the Bitcoin in the state files are, on the blockchain, are hashed addresses, which in many cases should be considered to be secure. Even if that's the case, there's so many different public addresses that are known. I mean, Satoshis are known. It's not, people don't always consider the confidence. They'll talk about, for example, I read a great article on Bitcoin that really broke it down as far as what it was, and they said basically there's not a threat because we have paid a public key hash. But in order to do that, all you have to do is take your Bitcoin and send a payment, and then bounce it back to your pay to public key hash address, and you're secure, because the only thing that would be on the blockchain would be the hashed address. But this article didn't cover anything like if any of the other Bitcoins on the chain were to become compromised, what confidence would do, to the ecosystem. We're already talking about blockchain, quantum computing, hashing, encryption, public key, asymmetric, blah, 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 LMNOP. When things start to get attention, people are going to be confused. And we've been doing these videos for over a year now. And, you know, there are times that I'm still trying to find the correct narrative in order to really just communicate this as easily as possible. And at the intersection of quantum and blockchain, that's a real challenge. So our project is focused on keeping your digital assets quantum secure. We have our Ethereum project, which we'll be able to quantum secure Ether for Ethereum and a select subset of ERC20s. If you don't know what ERC20s are, those are other blockchain projects that run on the Ethereum network. But I mean, that's the threat. So, I mean, everyone that's watching this just needs to ask himself, all I'm suggesting is, I'm not saying drop Bitcoin, drop Ethereum, drop Polkadot. I'm actually a big fan of Polkadot and Ethereum and Bitcoin. They all have their own little niches. We're not saying drop. We're not saying drop those. What we're saying is, do your own research, look at the risks. And if you think that there's a measurable risk there, which I think is hard to argue that there isn't, in Satoshi's words, it might make sense to get some.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to kind of close in that part. What I want to do is, you briefly touched on, what our project is about and a little bit of, the direction of where it's going. Could you dive in really quick? I'll do a few overlays in the video here. Can you just talk about, where someone might want to get started on our website if they're going there for the first time? Maybe they haven't been to the QRL.org before. Can you just kind of, touch on a few things, whether it be, reading the white paper or, going to wallet.theqrl.org? Can you just maybe leave us in this video with one area to kind of do a little bit of further initial research, and then we can go from there?
Yeah, I definitely start off at the web page. There's good information on there. There's also an FAQQ.info, I think is what it is.
Yeah, built by the community.
Yeah, community website that breaks down the quantum threat. So if you want to learn about QRL, go to www.theqrl.org. If you want to go to a site that has some good information about the quantum threat, go to FAQQ.info. If you want to see if you want to see things explained in video format, definitely go through our other videos that we've done. We've been doing these for 14, 15 months now. Go look at those. I've tried to take a systematic, chronological approach to kind of help people kind of get their foot in the door with the quantum threat. If you're a visual learner and you just want to hear it, have it shown to you, go there. If you want to engage with our community members and talk about this stuff, we have a passionate, lively Discord group that you can do that. So depending on what your goal is, that's what I recommend.
Awesome. That leaves 3 to 4 really quality resources depending on the way that they want to absorb content. And if you haven't already done so, make sure that you hit that lovely little subscribe button below. That way, when we come out with new content each week, you are the very first to know about it. As we come out with new content, you don't want to just randomly come to YouTube and 3 weeks later realize you missed a good video or two. So make sure that you hit that subscribe button to do that first. And just as Strike said, if you want to see what's going on in our community, we've got a big community of 5,000 plus in Discord and FAQQ.info, theqrl.org. And Strike, I appreciate you diving into this topic of is Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme? Because not only is it, it's obviously a catchy title in the sense of, is people want to know, diving into that, of them being like, obviously I know it's not a Ponzi scheme, or, maybe if you're a skeptic, you think it is, but the underlying parts of, where the technology stems from and where it's going in the future is the more important part of the discussion. So Strike, thank you very much for diving on the episode today, and everyone at home, keep those digital assets secure, and we will both see you next week. Take care.
Thanks,
Adios.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Bye.